in the context of the growth, development, jobs creation, and social upliftment that is embedded in our national development agenda. This week.
Morning, everyone. It's a real pleasure and an honor to be here. Particular greetings, Premier, MECs, mayors, ambassadors, and of course all of you, the stakeholders that make up this really exciting discussion. So Deepak gave a long introduction, just to say that the Presidential Climate Commission was set up by President Ramaphosa just over a year ago. We are a multi-stakeholder body, so it's a commission made up of business representatives, labor, organized labor, NGOs and environmental activists, civic organizations, and of course government itself. And we have the main economic ministries sitting on the commission. And the reason it's composed like that is that embedded in the President's vision for this transition is that we need to come together and make the decisions, the core decisions around this transition in a collective way. And I'm sure you listened to the various sonas and you've heard the President speak about a social compact, what we need to basically drive the economy and drive economic transformation, and very much what our job is around the climate transition is to build a compact around the sometimes very difficult decisions that we've got to take to make this transition succeed. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the climate transition, and it sounds like yesterday we really covered a lot of the ground. So I'm just going to sort of touch on the points and emphasize them. I think the first thing to say is the transition is already underway. We're no longer talking about something in the future. It's happening now. And it's happening in two very dramatic ways. The one is the physical effects of a warming climate. So as a country, we're already experiencing those effects. The scientists have told us that we are going to have hotter and drier conditions on the west of the country. We're going to have wetter and more unstable weather patterns on the eastern seaboard of the country. And we've seen the KZN floods and the repeat run of those floods this last weekend, and it's bringing home to us in a very graphic way the kinds of risks we face in this transition. Now, Mpumalanga straddles a little bit of both of those weather patterns. And you're likely to get both of them. So, as we go into this El Nino, La Nina cycle, the peaks and the dips of that cycle are going to get more extreme. We're going to have more severe and extreme weather events. tornadoes, cyclones, storms, and the weather's going to get less predictable, which is terrible for farmers because they don't really know when they're planting their crops in the spring what kind of growing conditions they're going to be facing and whether the crops that they're planting are going to survive. So we've got this physical change happening around us, and I can't tell you where we're going to end up with that change. If we keep the world to below 2 degrees, well below 2 degrees, we talk about 1.5 degrees warming, the effects are going to be, manageable. If we do not keep global warming to 2 degrees, we are into very serious uncharted terrain. And the downside of this, and you saw this so graphically with the KZN flood, the people that suffer the most are poor people living in dense, informal settlements without access to adequate infrastructure and services. And the middle classes can move. A lot of us are in well-managed settlements. We've got the infrastructure and the stormwater drainage. It's properly planned human settlements. So we need to understand that the physical effects of climate change have a very strong way of accentuating the triple challenges we already face as a country. So poverty, inequality, unemployment. Climate makes those all much worse. And if we're going to talk about a just transition, we've got to talk about how we build the resilience of poor households and badly planned informal settlements. The other part of the transition that's already happening, and you're starting to feel the effects in this province, is the energy transition. And the energy transition is it's one of these epochal shifts in the global economy. And it's building on previous shifts. So, you had the era of coal and steam power that drove the Industrial Revolution. You had the era of, liquid fuels and the internal combustion engine, which, drove our interconnected, mobile, modern trading system. And you had the information age, which connected the world further and brought all of these technologies together and allowed us to set up what we understand today to be the modern economy. And the energy transition, the climate transition, but particularly in energy, is of the same order of magnitude. And it's got a broad target. So we know that by around the middle of the century, less than 30 years away, we need to get the global economy to what we call net zero. And net zero is a point at which the amount of emissions that we still, there's some activities that we're never going to be able to completely eliminate emissions from. I mean, you can just think of cattle farming, for instance. I mean, cows, birth and farm. There's not much you can do about it. Sorry, Premier, for using such a blunt word. So, and there are going to be some residual emissions that are really hard to debate in industrial sectors. But we've got to reach a point where those residual emissions are offset by what we call sinks. And, we're well endowed in this country with carbon sinks. It's the forests that you grow in Mpumalanga and the grasslands, which are a very powerful way of capturing carbon in the soil, and the wetlands and peatlands, which you've also got in abundance in Mpumalanga, which are capturing carbon and filtering the water and cleaning it and creating the kinds of water resources that we need. So we need to reach a point where the sinks and the residual emissions are balancing each other. And that's a dramatic shift. I mean, we are going to have to radically cut high emitting fuels, and particularly here in Mpumalanga. I mean, we've built the Mpumalanga economy on this abundant natural resource that we have, which is coal. And we need to rebuild the economy on the other abundant natural resource that we have, which is wind and solar. And, even though the Northern Cape will tell you that they're a better destination for solar, the fact is you've got really good wind resources. You've got really good wind resources around the edge of the escarpment here in Mpumalanga, and your solar resource is as good as anywhere in Europe. So, don't let the Northern Cape tell you that you can't build solar. You can do solar here in a way that is commercially viable and at scale. Massive solar array. So that's the transition that's underway, and we're going to have to take some steps on the journey to get there. For us in South Africa, we're trying to create an electricity system, an energy system, which, as Andre spoke about yesterday, is more decentralized. It's going to be more competitive. There's going to be diverse forms of ownership, and we want to see more socially owned and worker-owned energy projects coming into the system. Obviously, we see the private sector playing a major role in bringing those projects into the system. We want to also see publicly owned energy projects, and some of them are at a level and scale that you're going to have to do with the state standing as guarantor behind those projects. But we're going to be needing to reach out to private capital, to workers, to all of you with technical skills in this transition to build this new energy economy. So, we're talking about a transition. And when we talk about a transition, the question in everyone's mind is, so how fast is that transition going to be? And I'm afraid I can't tell you exactly how fast it will be. And it's unlikely to be a smooth transition. So you've seen, for instance, with this current global setup, the war in Ukraine, the emergence of COVID, the way that suddenly fossil fuels are back again. So, the coal mining companies are printing money at the moment. They're doing extremely well. And when I talk to the bosses of the coal mining companies, they scoff at me when I say the coal market's going to fall off the cliff. So we can have the debate, but what we can tell you is that from 2025 onwards, coal, the decline that coal has been going through is going to continue. From into the 2030s, the coal market is going to decline dramatically. We're still going to need fossil fuels. We're going to need a big slug of gas to get us through this transition. We're going to need to run the gas infrastructure probably for 10, 20 years. But into the 2040s and 2050s, we're going to be putting gas in. So, we equally don't want to be stuck with stranded gas assets. So there's a very critical question that we've got to grapple with as a country, which is how much gas infrastructure do we want to use? How do we avoid the problem of stranded assets as we get towards that net zero target that we have to do? So, these are some of the issues we're grappling with in the energy transition. The one thing I can promise you is that, we've got all these coal-fired power stations. Many of them are at the end of their lives. I mean, it is simply uneconomic for Eskom to be continuing to operate and maintain those coal-fired power stations. There's a decommissioning plan. We're obviously not going to decommission into a vacuum. So energy security is critical, and we can only decommission as we bring new renewable power, balanced with batteries and in the transition gas, to be able to sustain the energy system. So we're not going to decommission into a vacuum. And our commitment to the workers and the communities linked to those coal-fired power stations is that we are going to repurpose them. We are going to invest in economic diversification, and none of those workers are going to lose their jobs. That's a commitment that we're making. And you've heard a lot said about the just transition in South Africa. We see the just transition as a fundamental starting point for this kind of transition. And what we mean by a just transition is that we've got to build the resilience of our communities to the physical effects of climate change. We need to assist workers and new entrants coming into the labour market to adjust to the labour force of the future, because the labour force in 10, 20 years is going to look very different to the labour force of today. We need a whole set of new skills around, the renewable value chains, the green hydrogen value chains, the scaling up of battery technology and manufacture, the shift into green forms of producing steel and cement. All of this is going to need a very differently skilled workforce. And as government, we are committed to ramping up our investment in skills and reskilling so that workers can transition. We're also committed to putting in place the safety nets to ensure that anyone that isn't able to transition into another job or a livelihood is ultimately protected. And I'm sure you're aware and have been following the very active national debate that's going on around a basic income grant. Ultimately, that's the kind of safety net we want to be able to roll out to everyone. But what we're actively exploring as the Commission is to at least start with those kinds of safety nets in places like Mpumalanga, where you're going to need them the most to navigate this transition. So, I've already spoken a bit about jobs and the social protections and the skills development. And you saw a lot of the modeling that's been done around employment. And when you listen to people's concerns about the climate transition and the just transition, you would tend to go away with the message, oh, we're going to lose jobs in this climate transition. In fact, the story is far more positive than that. We are going to create far more jobs in the renewable value chains. So, mining the green minerals that we need for renewable energy, localizing the manufacture of the towers and the panels and the assemblies, doing the construction and doing the operations and maintenance. So all of that, the battery technologies, the shift into green hydrogen, the shift into the other green industrial processes, taken together, there are more jobs in that economy than in the current fossil fuel dependent economy. So the issue is not that we're going to lose jobs, we're going to create jobs. But the sectors of the economy are going to shift. And many of the jobs are not going to be in the same places. So mining, for instance, is going to do well in the future. We've got many of the minerals that we need for the future green economy. We've got nickel, we've got cobalt, we've got vanadium, we've got rare earths, we've got copper and iron and steel, the PGM group. It's just that a lot of those minerals, unfortunately, are not here in Mpumalanga. They're in neighboring provinces, Limpopo, Northwest, Northern Cape. So they're going to be geographic shifts in employment, and they're going to be sectoral shifts in employment. And it's those shifts that we've got to anticipate, we've got to think about, and we've got to actively plan to make sure that every worker has a path into this new economy. So, that's what we mean by the just transition. Every worker must be able to find their path. And every person that's now entering the education system, and then, the TVET and higher education system, every one of those people has to find a path into this future labor. So, to bring it back to Mpumalanga, you are going to face a very significant downscaling of coal mining and coal power generation. We see huge potential in the transition for Mpumalanga as a green energy hub for the country. And you bring a number of major assets to the table in order to enable you to do that. So I've already spoken about the renewable resource. The other resource that you have is the existing electricity grid infrastructure. I'm sure you are aware that we've already mapped the renewable resource in this country is configured in a very different way to the coal resource. And we build our grid for the coal resource and not for the renewable energy resource. So our grid capacity is already maxed in areas like the Northern and the Western Cape, and it's very difficult to put new energy projects in. And it's going to take us time. I mean, we putting this 8.5 billion rand kind of finance deal together. We're going to invest substantially in upgrading and transitioning the grid and creating this independent grid operator. So there's work going on to reconfigure the grid, but that's going to take time. And right now, if you want to put renewable energy projects onto the grid, Mpumalanga is the place to be doing it. You've got the grid infrastructure, you've got the renewable resource. You've also, the other big asset you've got is the pipeline from Mozambique, the Romco pipeline. There's additional capacity, we think, on that pipeline, and we can link it to a number of the coal-fired power stations that are being decommissioned and do some significant peaking power and even some gas baseload in the immediate term in order to balance this renewable dominant grid. So, we think this talk about a green energy hub in this province is not just talk. We think there are very real locational advantages to pursuing an aggressive green energy strategy. And we're extremely encouraged by Sasol's long-term play around green hydrogen. And if anyone in this country can make it happen, Sasol's got the muscle, they've got the technological capability, and they've got the intent. And I've been enormously encouraged by Sasol's commitment to go net zero by 2050. It's a massive undertaking, and we will stand ready to support Sasol in making that journey. I mean, obviously, we're also going to scrutinize what you do and hold you to account. So that's some of the resources that you have as the province. You've also got obviously some very significant mining companies already operating in this province. As I said, they're printing cash at the moment. I mean, I know they're all engaged in very difficult wage negotiations and they're pleading poverty. Don't believe it. These guys are in the pound seats. I mean, it's fantastic for them and their shareholders. It's fantastic for the country and our revenue as a country. So it's creating a lot more fiscal space than we had, and you're seeing it in terms of the value of the rand. It's been holding itself up very well. Just a couple of points on the mining companies. So all of these mining companies have social and labor plans, which they signed up to. The one concern we have is that some companies, and I don't want to be pointing fingers, but are not living up to those social and labor plans. And, if you were true to the principle behind those plans are, in a sense, the commitment by those mining companies to a just transition. So we want to put a lot of emphasis on returning to the social and labor plans that many of the mining companies signed up to when they originally applied for their mining licenses. The other critical issue is rehabilitation. So there's going to be a huge job creation potential as we start to transition in Mpumalanga out of coal mining. We want to do a major rehabilitation of the land, and that itself creates a huge opportunity to address one of the profound structural inequalities in this country, which is people's lack of access to land and to economic assets. So there's an imperative, there's a transformational imperative behind restoring the land, getting it back to a point where we can use it for agriculture or the renewable energy green economy activities I was talking about. And all the mining companies are meant to be investing in their rehabilitation funds. So, in fact, the capital to do this massive, large-scale rehabilitation is already meant to be. Because the problem is that it's been under-regulated on the DMRE side. And some of the companies, again, I don't want to point fingers, have skimped on the capitalization of those rehabilitation funds. And we are going to hold you to your commitment. So, we're willing to support mining, but mining's got to be done in a way that doesn't long-term destroy the environment and destroy people's ability to craft a new life and a new economy. I've been told I've got to stop talking. Sorry. I just want to make 2 points before closing. So, the one, I was incredibly proud to see that you launched this Green Cluster Agency. I want Premier and your cabinet, thank you for pushing this thing. It's incredibly significant. It's an agency that we are committing to work with and to put the resources that we are raising for the just transition at the disposal of this agency. And one of the things we are working on, in fact, your facilitator, Deepak, is the head of climate finance for the Climate Commission. We are committed to creating a mechanism to fund the just transition. So what I've been talking about, the investments in skills and economic diversification and social protections, we are in the process of designing the financial mechanism, and we're exploring different revenue streams that we can channel into the work that that agency does. So just watch the space, we'll come back to it. So just in closing, I want to urge, we've set up this climate commission. It's sort of based on this idea of the social compact. The social partners involved in the commission are committed to working together to make this transition a reality. We want to encourage all of you to embrace a similar way of working. So, compacting is just isn't just one set of meetings happening at the national level. Compacting is a process that we all embrace and that we make part of the way that we go about our lives. So, we're hoping to see at provincial and regional and local level similar multi-stakeholder initiatives that tap the regulatory power that government brings, the dynamism and investment that the private sector brings, the environmental principles and governance that the NGOs bring, the insights and protection of jobs that Labour will fight for. We want all these forces around the table, not just nationally, provincially, locally, and we as the Climate Commission will work with you and collaborate around this transition as we move forward. So thank you for listening to me. Sorry I went on for a bit long. Well done to the conveners of this conference and to all of you for making this such an excellent event. Thank you.